Right, the computer says we're live, so I believe we are live. Welcome everyone. Welcome to another My Lefty live stream, PMQs. Another Wednesday is upon us. Let's see what's happening in the House of Commons. Before we go to the Commons though, just quickly going to catch up with some fondue. As always, we're going to wait in the lounge while people start to arrive. Hope you're well tonight. Thanks for joining us. And I'm almost going to dive straight into it. There has been this news today about another defection from the Tories to Labour. I'll be putting my 2 cents in about that before we get onto PMQs. But aside from that, breaking story which came out today, more or less going to get straight into it. Please do hit all of the relevant buttons, subscribe, thumbs up, notification bell, etc. Really does help the channel to reach a wider audience. You might also like to consider supporting the channel with a membership. There have been some changes to memberships, which you might have seen recently. I did put a video out about it, but if you've not, I'll quickly touch on that in a moment as well. And then into the day's session with commentary and analysis, PMQs. But yeah, please do consider subscribing, as well as joining the channel. And you get lots of great perks, including exclusive stuff, videos, live streams, early viewings, that kind of thing. And that's from just 99p. So the changes recently, I should say, there were 2 tiers of membership. Now it's just the one for 99p, and I've pretty much, long story short, just thrown everything into that cheaper package so that everybody gets to benefit more for less. Because this is the channel about socialism after all, spreading the love and solidarity, etc. If you're watching on a replay, you might also want to consider using the Buy Me a Coffee page. The link will be in the video description as well as for the channel. And if you're watching live, you can always get my attention with a super chat. I'll try and keep up with the chat as much as I can. Please do keep it cordial as always. Politics Clive, welcome to the stream. This week it was PMQ's Prime Minister asked questions to avoid answering them. Not much of a change there then in that case. Welcome to the stream tonight, Clive. Hope you're well. Yeah, this is my genuine first reaction to the PMQs, as always. So I don't know what's going to happen aside from it was mentioned in that article. I saw a little subheading that Sunak was throwing a bit of shade at Starmer and back and forth between the two of them over this recent defection. So that's the big inflatable ball that they were throwing around the House of Commons this week. We'll see where that leads. I'm sure that's going to come up a few times. And we will be keeping counts of how many times Sunak says stop the boats, as always. And also how many times Keith might mention that he's a lawyer or former director of public prosecutions. Last week it was a 4-0 victory for Sunak on that little game. So we'll see how we do this week. Okay, we shan't hang around for long this week. I'll get over to that story. And then to PMQs itself. So yeah, let us know how you're all doing tonight in the chat. And if you're watching on a replay, please do add a comment as well. Just a quick plug as well before I get onto this article. New videos just dropped. I've put in basically my point of view on the recent developments in Gaza, in Palestine, with the ceasefire agreement being agreed to by Hamas, but then the subsequent offensive on Rafah by Israel, who projected the terms. So my thoughts on that, if you'd like to check that out after the stream, of course, bookmark it or put it on your save video list, and then you can catch up with that later. Okay. Now, speaking of this, you know, no wonder Keith's having the party. They're probably celebrating this defection tonight. And Rachel Reeves is throwing her own one on the side as usual. Not popped in and seen how that's going for a while, actually. Let's just take a quick look at how Rachel's doing. Still just John Hurt there. These are the things you've got to look forward to when you defect to Labour these days, apparently. Right, let's snip over and take a look at this article. So yeah, Natani El-Fiki, careful on the pronunciation there, has become the latest to defect to the Labour from the Tories. That's the long and short of it. But there was Dr. Dan Poulter last week, of course. Mentioned that in one of the live streams, I believe it was. There she is, and might be a familiar face as well. She's the MP for Dover, down obviously where there's a massive port. And there was the P&O scandal. You remember that, about the redundancies and the short notice on the redundancies. All of the staff there got treated really badly, and there was a protest, and she went down there. This was 2-3 years ago now, and she went down there trying to gain some publicity from it, trying to get a photo op from it. She arrived to chants of "shame on you," which she thought were directed at the owners of P&O ferries, or whoever else was there as a rep for the company. But they were actually directed at her because of other recent goings on in the Tory party, and quite a few of her constituents actually were pointing out that it was a pretty crass move to go and try and take that photo opportunity in the midst of this scandal, even though, you know, her government weren't really doing anything. And there was a lot of public outrage at the time. So now she's been welcomed with open arms to the Labour Party alongside Dr. Dan Coulter, as I said. I won't read through all of this, just quickly skim through. It's worth pointing out a majority, 12,278 the article says, but that's because there's been a boundary change. The Tories are trying to move the goalposts, of course, in order to take less of a drubbing in the ballot box. They've started to rearrange the constituencies, the boundaries of constituencies, etc., in hope of putting the buffers on for what's coming at the general election. They're going to lose a lot of seats, undoubtedly, but without getting sidetracked too much based on those local elections, we might even be seeing a hung parliament, but that's another story. The Transport Minister, Hugh Merriman, said he was absolutely staggered by the defection, accused her of being opportunistic. Well, they're all careerists, aren't they? Tories, Labour, what's left of the Labour Party, that is. Yeah, pure careerists. And they want to line their own little nests as well while they're in the jobs. That's the reason why Sunak, almost a billionaire, wants a 80 odd K a year job. I did notice this when I saw the article earlier. Not going to play any of the videos, obviously. We're going to be going through the full PMQs and no spoilers or anything like that, but they are pointing out that she did go and sit on the Labour bench immediately. But another thing that she said, which is pretty hard, well, not that hard to believe coming from a former Tory, now a Labour MP, but she said the reason for the defection was that the Tories hadn't come through on the election, like, pledges, the promises, basically. As far as I can recall, there were only two main ones. One of those was HS2, and yeah, fair enough, that has been a disaster, but that's not what she was referring to. She's banging on about migration, being the MP for Dover. She obviously feels that's a bit of a hot topic. Though that said, it wouldn't surprise me if the likes of Nigel Farage were still welcoming Labour these days. But the only other thing on the manifesto, really, for the Tories at the last election was leaving the EU. You know, the old get Brexit done. Just had to get us out of the EU in any way, shape or form whatsoever, in order to be able to try and tell people that their election had been a success. Yeah, but apart from that, it was slim pickings in terms of what they were trying to get people to vote them in for at the last election. I'm not going to play any of those, spoil the videos. So she's been elected there since 2019, it says. I'll just go over a few of the other minor details. But someone from Momentum, left-wing campaign group within well, it's a prescribed group now. A lot of former members of the Labour Party and Momentum would have been prescribed as members. They said that the hard right Tory should have no place in Labour, a Labour Party worthy of name. Yeah, it does speak volumes about Starmer, that he's welcomed her with open arms, leaving Diane Abbott out in the cold. Yeah, good point, good point. It doesn't prove that she's started to become more socialist by any means, by any stretch of the imagination. No, it just means that Labour have all the way properly turned Tory now. Which is a damn shame to see. It really is, I must say so. As I've said quite a few times on streams. Alright then, let's get into it. Just make a couple of adjustments. Okay, that'll do. Right, and let's crack on. Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
We now come to questions to Prime Minister Kirsten Oswald.
Question 1, please.
Mr. Speaker, I know the whole House will join me in congratulating John Swinney on becoming SNP leader and Scottish First Minister. I look forward to working constructively with him to deliver for the people of Scotland. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Kirsten Oswald.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah, it's been off and on whether Swinney will be running unopposed or not.
The shocking rise in the number of teenagers trying vaping, and I asked the Prime Minister if he would take decisive action to stop vape advertising on football strips. He declined to do that. Since then, I have had an exchange with the Scottish Chief Medical Officer, Professor Sir Gregor Smith, during a session of the Tobacco and Vapes Bill Committee, and he said, where I become very
Hey Brett James, welcome to the stream. Hope you're well tonight. Let us know how you're doing. Thanks for joining us.
In a way that promotes behaviours that are known to be unsafe or unhealthy. Can I ask the Prime Minister again? Does he still think that it is right that vape companies should sponsor football kits?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the Honourable Lady...
Just pause very quickly. I do remember this coming up last week, and obviously this concerns sponsorships on football shirts. I think Sunak's position on this is he's obviously very anti-smoking. He's putting a lot of legislation and in terms of budget as well, things against tobacco use. But in doing so, that means that he does have to favour the vape industry, and he's probably getting some deals done in favour of vape companies over tobacco companies. Pretty sure that's one of his rather strong personal beliefs as well. So in order to put down tobacco, he's going to have to support vape companies. So that's probably the main reason he's dodged this particular issue.
He agrees with me and the government that we should do more to tackle youth vaping, and that's why we are bringing forward measures in the new bill to restrict the availability and appeal of vapes to children specifically, whether that's flavours or indeed marketing. As she knows, advertising of vapes is already heavily restricted by UK regulations, including a ban on advertising on television and radio and most online. Now, we've seen football take positive voluntary action in the past on issues such as this, but I will say...
She did ask about football strips specifically.
In the usual way.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Shush.
Serving officer in the armed forces. In recent weeks, Mr. Speaker, my right honourable friend has announced plans to control welfare and get people back to work, to increase defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, and pass legislation to get flights off to Rwanda.
They found all that money all of a sudden, remember? To increase defence spending.
In South East Cornwall care about, and that the leader of the opposition should do the right thing and back them.
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a fantastic champion for her local area. And can I also thank her daughter for her service in the armed forces? And she's right, I'm not surprised that the Labour Party don't back our plans to stop the boats. I'm not surprised they don't back our plans to get people into work and reform welfare. But I do think that they should do...
One sec. I wished him to start it so much I didn't even bring up the score. Right. Here we go. So, first one. 1-0. First of a few, potentially. On we go. I'll try and do
the right thing when it comes to the security of our nation, and that's back our plans to increase defence spending and give our brave armed forces personnel the resources they need to keep us safe.
We now come to Leader of the Opposition, Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I warmly welcome the new member for Blackpool South? After the representation that fine town has had recently, it's good to know they've got a proper champion back at last. Can I also warmly welcome the new Labour MP for Dover to these benches? Mr. Speaker,
well, it's bound to come up.
If 1 week a Tory MP who's also a doctor says the Prime Minister can't be trusted with the NHS and joins Labour, and the next week the Tory MP for Dover, on the front line of the small boats crisis, says the Prime Minister cannot be trusted with our borders and joins Labour, what...
He's openly gloating about it, but it isn't something he should be gloating about, how Tories are perfectly happy to go and sit on the Labour benches opposite. And I know that is what Starmer wants. He wants, they both have the same neoliberal ideology. But the fact that it's very cheap political point scoring as far as I'm concerned. What it actually says to the public is vote Labour, get Tory, yet again.
What is the point of this failed government staggering on?
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I actually join him in welcoming his newest MP for Blackpool? I must say he looks a lot happier than the member who was sitting there last week. But let me also join with him And let me join with him in congratulating all new and paying tribute to all former councillors, PCCs and mayors across the country. I hope his...
Still have to hold that seat come the general election, which I suspect he will, but any victory in a by-election, you know, between here and the next general election is going to have to be repeated.
In sharp contrast to the legacy left by the last Labour government, which was a letter joking that there was no money left.
Well, Mr. Speaker,
That bit about the note being left, saying there's no money left. Someone on the stream last week, I believe it might have been Odin Allfather, reminded us that that's actually a traditional joke. It's just like an in-joke. The politicians have it. Would have been the same if it was the Tories handing government over to Labour or Lib Dems, Greens, whoever. But he still brings it up. Maybe Starmer doesn't even know that. Yeah, you're right, Clive, in the chat. At least Poulter was stepping down, which kind of seems strange why you would defect, even if you were going to stand down if you won at the next general election. It just, you know, seems like a bit of a gesture more than anything else.
in addition to losing 2 Tory MPs in 2 weeks, the Prime Minister's been on the receiving end of some of the biggest by-election swings in history. He's also lost 1,500 Tory councillors, half of his party's mayors, and a leadership election to a lettuce.
But you didn't win all of those councillors. You got less than half of the Tories' losses.
Before he takes the hint.
Well, Mr. Speaker...
The Greens and Independents made the biggest gains in terms of percentage, by the way, about 70% increases for both of them. Labour's just 19.
As cocky as he likes about local elections, but come a general election, it's policy that counts, Mr. Speaker. Now, one year on...
Well, you've both got the same policies.
1 year on from that advice, what has he managed? £28 billion of tax rises, 70 new business regulations, 30 U-turns, and a deputy leader under a police investigation.
No, I'm not one to rush to defend Keir Starmer, but with this Angela Rayner thing, he pointed out she's not under investigation as far as I know. The Tories made obviously a lot of fuss over it, said that she should have been investigated. One of them famously, hilariously, cringily couldn't even name what she should be charged with on the thing. And again, I'm not defending Labour so much as just Sunak's attempts at, you know, digging his elbow in, which is pathetic because they've just drummed up that hype about prosecution that isn't even, or investigation even, that isn't actually happening. It's pathetic.
I'm surprised he brought up a police investigation. I think his record is played 1, no, actually 2, the seatbelt as well. Played 2, lost 2 in relation to police investigation. But it's the same. The public keep telling him, the voters tell him it's not good enough. Instead of listening, he keeps telling them everything's fine, if only they'd realise his greatness. He just doesn't get it. But at least after Thursday night, Mr. Speaker, he can go to the many places
the only time
home
Rachel Reeves smiles is at Starmer's jokes.
In Southampton or Downing Street, he's got
inverted comma jokes.
At his mansion in Richmond, he can enjoy a brand new Labour mayor of North Yorkshire. And at his pad in Kensington, he can celebrate a historic 3rd term for the Mayor of London. Now that he too can enjoy the benefits of this changed Labour Party, is he really still in such a hurry?
Hey, Phil and Mithril, welcome to the chat. Welcome, channel members. How are you doing this evening? Great to see you.
To see the honourable gentleman in North Yorkshire, but probably not as surprised as he was when he realised he couldn't take the tube there, Mr. Speaker. But I can tell him that the people of North...
This is a man who'd probably take a helicopter I say to go and get a pint of milk from the shop, to send one of his servants to go and get a pint of milk from the shop. Doesn't even know how much a loaf of bread costs, for God's sake.
Yorkshire, the people of North Yorkshire believe in hard work, secure borders, lower taxes and straight-talking common sense, Mr. Speaker. They're not going to get any of that from a virtue-signalling lawyer from North London.
Now, I know Keith didn't say... Sorry to interject yet again. I know Keith didn't say it himself, the Starmer did. But, yeah, I'm going to count that as one for Keith. Because, as I mentioned last week, it is unfair because Sunak gets longer to talk, so more opportunities to say his catchphrase than Starmer does. So I'm just going to change that. I'm going to count that as one. That's one for Keith. That's the first one he's got, actually, since his phrase made an appearance in the game. Right, let's crack on. I'll change the score now.
It was great to be in Northallerton, where they just voted to reject the Prime Minister's proposition. Mr. Speaker, he's finally found something in common with the British public. No matter where he calls home, all his neighbours are backing this changed Labour Party. And they keep rejecting him because they have sussed him out. They know there's nothing behind the boasts, the gimmicks, the smug smile. He's a dodgy salesman, desperate to sell them a dud. Now, Mr. Speaker, 16 days ago, when he held a press conference claiming victory on Rwanda, he said the next few weeks will be about action. People want deeds, not words. So let's test that. How many small boat crossings have there been since he said that 16 days ago?
You're lining him up for a drubbing on the game here, Keith. He's going to...
Mr. Speaker,
okay,
actually,
stand by.
Just before we go on to that, he talked about a change. He talked about a changed Labour Party.
Mithril, thanks a lot for the 5 gifted memberships. Thanks a lot for that solidarity. Hope all of you members enjoy your perks as well. Please do check those out. Thanks again, Mithril.
That's important because he talked about a changed Labour Party. He talks about it a lot. But just this morning, and he also talked about his new mayor in London. So just this morning, we've learned that the Labour mayor in London believes, and I quote, that there is an equivalence between the brutal terrorist attack of Hamas and Israel defending itself. And let me be crystal clear. There is absolutely no equivalence between a terrorist coup and a democratic state. So can I ask him now, will he take this opportunity to demonstrate that Labour Party has changed? And will he condemn those comments?
Oh, ridiculous. Oh, ridiculous. Ridiculous. Give over. Both of you. They don't... Yeah. If they repeat the lie often enough, they're hoping it'll come true.
He didn't even attempt to answer the question. He knows the answer. Since he claimed victory 16 days ago, there have been a staggering 2,400 small boat crossings. 2,400!
Go on, Rishi, he's lining you up for a stop the boats. You can take a 2-1 lead here. What's wrong with you?
Perma backlog, which is forecast to rise to 100,000 by the end of this year. Now, the Prime Minister pretends he will remove them all to Rwanda, but Rwanda can only take a few hundred a year. At that rate, the Prime Minister's grand plan would take over 300 years to remove them all. Mr. Speaker, that's tens of thousands of people with their claims going unprocessed, who are going to be here for their entire lifetime living in hotels at the taxpayers' expense. It is absurd to call that anything other than an...
Well, he's just giving credence to Sunak's xenophobia with what he's saying there. That's awful, Keith. Terrible.
He had the opportunity to condemn the comments of his mayor, a mayor who said that there is an equivalence between Hamas and Israel. He did not do that, and everyone will see what that is. That is the changed Labour Party, Mr. Speaker, right there. Since I became Prime Minister, small boat crossings are down by a third. That's because we've doubled NCA funding, increased enforcement rates, closed bank accounts, deported
I'll give him that
24,000
one.
people, processed more claims, and, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to border control, there is a crucial difference between us. We want secure borders. He's happy with open borders.
Mr. Speaker, the whole country knows that removing less than 1% of asylum seekers isn't stopping the boats. It's granting
Keith, you
an
scored
amnesty,
an own
a
goal.
Tory amnesty.
It's an own goal.
But
What's going on? They both scored on goals. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Make up your own comedy and analogies for scoring political own goals, if you will. Post them in the chat if you'd like to share them with us as well. But that really was a genuine one from Keith there.
he thinks the voters are wrong, if he thinks his own MPs joining the Labour Party are wrong, if he thinks anyone believes any of the nonsense that he spouts, why doesn't he put it to the test and call a general election?
Mr. Speaker, he talks about removing people. This is a person who campaigned to stop the deportation of foreign national offenders, Mr. Speaker. It shows how out of touch his values are with the British people. But, Mr. Speaker, it's yet another week where we hear nothing about his plan to do anything on the issues that matter to the country. Meanwhile, we're getting on, reforming welfare and getting people into work. He opposes it. We're controlling migration, legal and illegal. He opposes it. And as we heard, Mr. Speaker, we are boosting defence spending to strengthen our country. He opposes it, and that's the difference. He snipes from the sidelines. The Conservatives are building a brighter future.
You wouldn't think they just lost, 470 councillors at the last local election. They're sticking their chests out as though they've just made a shitload of gains. I know Keith's got nothing to gloat about. The amount of gains he got were pathetic. He should absolutely be trouncing him. He made just a 19% increase. And, as I've said for a while, it's going the way of the Greens and Independents in terms of gains by percentage. Unbelievable. But yeah, still very believable when you look at the hundreds of people sat before you. I hope they get on to Stephen Flynn pretty soon.
When it comes to small boat crossings, there's a lot of talk of human rights. But surely the only human right and life that matters is the life of children who are being taken across the channel. In this respect, will the government now do the only thing that will actually be a real deterrence, and that is to arrest and detain all those who land illegally on our shores and then offshore them promptly, so that once and for all we can save lives and end
This could be an assist from Sir Edward Lee, who's just lined it up for Sunak again.
Is right, that these crossings are incredibly dangerous and they risk people's lives. Just weeks ago, a 7-year-old girl died attempting the crossing, and that's why, as a matter of basic compassion, we must do everything we can to break the cycle of the criminal gangs. And that's why, Mr. Speaker, you need a deterrent. That's what the National Crime Agency say. That's how we dealt with illegal migrants from Albania, because it's...
Come on, Rishi, statistically migrants are very, very low down on the criminal stats. You know that. You're either dumb or playing dumb, as usual, just to serve your own xenophobic purposes and policies. Claptrap.
Only by removing people who shouldn't be here that we remove the reason for them to come in the first place. And that is how we'll control our borders. And it's clear that it's only this party that not only has a plan to stop the boats, but has a plan to stop the tragic loss of life in the Channel too.
SNP leader Stephen Flynn.
4-1 now.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I begin by also congratulating the...
Oh, awesome. Okay, Flynn's here, finally. Someone who can actually speak some sense. So that's 4-1 now on Stop the Votes versus I'm a Lawyer. Just want to catch up with a couple of mentions on the chat. Yeah, Phil. It takes no skill or talent to skin the Tories. They do it for themselves, and I wouldn't mind £3,000 and a free flight and a couple of weeks in Africa either. So yeah, let's all get signed up, and off we go for a free holiday. £3,000 spending money too. So, well, I don't want to lend any credit to Sunak's policies, but it's funny how we don't get offered that, isn't it? And yeah, typical, as you're saying, politics, Clive, typical Tories. They just punish the victims. That's all that the Tories know how to do. They hit down. They never hit up. And they kind of, a lot of them former public school attendees. And that's really just bred into them culturally. This whole culture of bullying and whatnot, and status. And Johnson, Cameron, so many of them would have gone through this in the formative years, and now that they've fully developed, as it were, quote unquote developed, this is what you get with the Tories, and it's really awful, and it sort of spills over into PMQs as well, with the the braying that comes and the noise. This kind of, you don't see this in other courts in Europe or across the rest of the world. It's an absolute outdated farce, of course, but the way that they do it is just another sort of symptom or side effect from this public schoolboy kind of attitude, all in all. Right, enough about waffling about Etonians. Let's crack on.
Fantastic John Swinney on becoming Scotland's first minister. Our opponents should be careful, very careful what they wish for. Mr. Speaker, as we await the imminent Israeli incursion into Rafah, where 1.2 million people are sheltering, including 600,000.
I love the way he rolls his R's.
It's been reported that the United States has paused an arms shipment to Israel. The UK will now follow suit, won't it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman may not realise, but the UK government doesn't itself directly provide arms or ship arms to Israel. And when it comes,
come on, give over. That's a real cop out there, Sunak.
I'm concerned about a full military incursion of Rafah, given the devastating humanitarian impact. I've made that position and point specifically to Prime Minister Netanyahu.
So we'll sell it to America, and then they'll sell it to Israel, or give it to Israel, whichever.
At hand to bring about a pause in the conflict, to release hostages and get more aid in.
Stephen Flynn.
Your typical response there, blah, blah, blah. Investigations about the law, get more humanitarian aid in. Not lifting a finger. Denial isn't just a river in Egypt, of course. And you're quite right there, Mithril in the chat. Sunak is the pilot who keeps missing the runway. Absolutely. Wouldn't want him flying my plane. You've all seen the meme of him talking to the bus passenger. Imagine him there next to you on a 757. Terrifying.
Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. The confidence that Israel has shown in its military ambitions in Rafah stems from the silence which has been shown from its allies on the front benches in this place and indeed elsewhere across the world. Now, we all know that UK arms and tech is supporting Israel's activities in Gaza and will be used in any attack on Rafah. Knowing that, and the devastation which is going to occur, surely the time has come to end our complicity and to halt arms sales to Israel.
I do want to say it's been fantastic, these awesome activists who shut down various weapons parts factories here in the UK, and how that's been going on for a sustained amount of time as well. You know, people are doing what they can because the government clearly aren't, to help stop those weapons getting across, these death showers that Israel are raining down onto Palestinians in Gaza. Sunak couldn't care less. There, you know, the Exchequer is too busy counting his receipts to actually have a heart or be able to appeal to his humanitarian side, which is, of course, as always, very much lacking.
Mr. Speaker, of course we take our defence export responsibilities extremely seriously, and that's why we operate one of the most robust licensing control regimes anywhere in the world. We periodically review advice on Israel's commitment to international humanitarian law, and ministers always act in accordance with that advice. And that is crystal clear for the House to understand. Our position with regard to export licences following the most recent assessment is unchanged, and I know that he will join me in urging all parties to engage in the negotiations that are happening so we can see a pause in fighting to get more aid in, hostages out, and then bring about a sustainable...
Hostages, October 7th, etc. We've had 6 months of this, and so many different questions have been put to him in so many different ways, both in PMQs as well as other debates and sessions in Parliament, and you just get the same cut and paste response every single bloody time. It beggars belief. It beggars belief when we see the amount of suffering that there is currently in Rafah, in Gaza, in Palestine as a whole. Lest we forget, the West Bank is being attacked as well, despite the fact that there's no Hamas presence there either. That's just another example of Netanyahu's fanaticism, his maniacal way of thinking, of course. So, from now until the general election, unfortunately, if ceasefire talks don't come through and the conflict is still happening by the time of the general election, this is all that you're going to get, no matter what the question is, how it's put to him. And Stephen Flynn's great at putting these questions, but just the distraction and deflection every time, that's all you're going to get. And they'll just change colours from blue to red, perhaps after the next general election, and it'll be Starmer doing exactly the same. As Phil's pointed out in the chat as well, Reeves and Thornbury, that's Rachel Reeves, Emily Thornbury, were both asked about halting arms sales and both deflected and didn't answer. We know where they're going to be sat in terms of policy when it comes to that. He's a Zionist, excuse me.
Ceasefire to this conflict.
Martin Bickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituents in rural villages and on the fringes of the Grimsby-Cleethorpes urban area are very concerned about overdevelopment. They recognise that the highway infrastructure and public services are already overloaded. Could my right honourable friend consider amending planning guidance so that local plans and decisions taken by local planning authorities are not overridden by planning inspectors? And they'd be greatly encouraged if he would agree to meet with me and my colleagues from the neighbouring Gainsborough and Grimsby constituencies to discuss this further.
My honourable friend is right that sustainable development...
It's that time of the week when a local MP brings up a local issue to talk to Sunak about, and they have the customary agreement to meet up and talk about it, and alas, nothing will get done that time of the week.
The relevant local plan in my honourable friend's area is due for further consultation later this year, and that he'll engage with that process, but I will happily meet with him and colleagues to discuss his situation further.
Ed Davey.
Mr. Speaker, the abuse suffered by 88-year-old Anne King at the hands of staff in her care home was captured on a hidden camera. The footage is stomach-churning. Anne died in October 2022, and it took nearly a year before the CQC launched a criminal investigation. Now Anne's children are working to protect other care home residents from being subjected to such appalling abuse. Her son came to see me as his MP to ask for my help in their campaign. So will the Prime Minister join me in backing Anne's Law, a proposal to include a national register to professionalise the care workforce and hold those staff who are abusive to account? And will he meet with Anne's family and myself to discuss this idea?
Well, absolutely, that should happen. Care services are one of many that have been stripped away and taken a battering under Tory rule. Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, who made quite a few gains at the last election, having been reduced to virtually nothing at the last GE. So, yeah, that's a great point. But Sunak and his predecessors over the last 15 years certainly have a lot to answer for in terms of those services being cut, lest we forget about the care home situation during the COVID-19 pandemic as well. Matt Hancock and Johnson both having a lot to answer for, definitely. But in terms of these cases that Ed Davies bringing up, I think it's absolutely revolting how anyone could treat an elderly person that way, whether they're a carer or not. But the fact that this is coming from the people whose job it is to care for them, I find that disgusting. I just find that absolutely revolting, and something does have to be done about it. It's a fair question from Davey there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, can I first of all extend my sympathies to Anne's family for what she went through. Obviously, that's not appropriate, and I'll make sure that the department engages with him and Anne's family on the proposed law. And he's right to say we should have high standards across the care industry, and we're walking towards more investment to support our care home staff, making sure that they have training, qualification to development, and we have a regime in place that can hold everyone to account for delivering the high standards that we would all expect.
Sarah Downs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that one of the greatest things that these backbenches bring to Westminster is plain old-fashioned common sense? And it's Derbyshire common sense. Derbyshire common sense. That means that the good people
Common sense?
surrounding villages
Are you-
reject the Sadiq
Are you on drugs?
and even the 20 miles an hour.
Where's she from? Derbyshire Dales.
With me and perhaps ask his neighbour if he will pay for the Ashbourne bypass.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know my honourable friend has been a dedicated campaigner for the Ashbourne bypass, and the government is committed to investing more in the Midlands, particularly investing every penny of the 9.6 billion from
thing.
HS2 back into the
On
local
hold,
area.
into
And she's
pipe
right
down.
that we will focus on drivers and their priorities, not continue the war on motorists, which is waged by the Labour Mayor in London, but also the Labour Party in Wales, with both ULEZ and 20-mile-an-hour speed limit.
Oh yeah, if anyone even suggests providing more, better and cheaper public transport, nationalised public transport as well, just try and call it a war on motorists. Garbage from Sunak.
It's this party that is unashamedly on the side of the motorist.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Our Child of the North cross-party group found that expectant mothers were terminating wanted pregnancies as they could not afford another mouth to feed. Recent figures show infant and child death rates have increased in the most deprived areas, and 50 children have died alone in unregulated accommodation. Is this his plan for a brighter Britain in action?
Mr. Speaker, obviously what the Honourable Lady has described is tragedy. Nobody wants to see children grow up in those circumstances, and that's why I'm proud that the government has overseen a significant fall in poverty, but particularly child poverty, since 2010 through a range of measures. And I'll make and I'll make sure that she is aware for her constituents of all the support that is in place, both through the Department of Health and through the Department for Work and Pensions and local authorities, to provide support to the most vulnerable families in our communities.
John Penrose.
Mr. Speaker, Weston-super-Mare is a growing town, so local health services are rightly growing too. Weston Hospital is treating more patients for a wider variety of problems than before. GP surgeries are offering thousands more appointments this year than last, and our new diagnostic centre means faster tests and treatments. But there's a fly in our NHS prescribed ointment. Dentistry isn't fixed.
Yeah, it's you, the Tories.
The recovery plan is very welcome, but when will it mean appointments that Westonians can book?
Mr. Speaker, our dentistry recovery plan will make dental services faster, simpler and fairer for patients, funding around 2.5 million more appointments. And I was pleased to note that access is improving in my honourable friend's area, with almost 10% more children seeing a dentist in June last year than the previous year. But we are going further. The new patient premium that was announced last year is ensuring...
No, the Tories' record on the NHS is absolute dog shit, rats in cat shit. And trying to gloat about any form of success whatsoever is an absolute affront to intelligence.
On pension injustices. Yet women born in the 1950s in my constituency of Dundee, and indeed every constituency in this House across these islands, are still waiting to hear if the UK government will listen to these recommendations and deliver compensation. Mr. Speaker, I was proud to see the Scottish Parliament support a motion last week calling for compensation to be delivered without delay, but utterly dismayed to see members of the Conservative Party and the Labour Party abstain. So can the Prime Minister finally set out when WSPI women will receive the compensation they rightly deserve?
Mr. Speaker, I understand the strong feelings across the chamber on this topic and the desire for urgency in addressing them. However, following the Ombudsman's 5-year investigation, it is imperative that we take the time to thoroughly review the comprehensive findings that have been published. An update to the House will be provided once the report's findings have been fully considered. More broadly, we are committed to ensuring pensioners have the dignity and security in retirement that they deserve, and most recently increasing the state pension by £900 thanks to the triple lock.
No, because when that's not taking inflation into consideration. Anyway, about the WSPI women thing. Yeah, imagine working your whole life and looking forward to your retirement only to be told that you've got to work for another half a decade or you're going to lose a massive chunk of your pension. It's disgusting. It's disgusting. This compensation's long overdue. I've seen a lot of debate over whether it was an official whether it was official Labour policy back in 2019. It was brought up by John McDonnell, but I don't believe it made it as far as the manifesto. However, I think, yeah, if Labour had won the last general election, then something certainly would have been done about it by now.
Philip Davis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister as appalled as I am at reports of militant civil servant, trade union, political activists seeking to find ways not to implement the Rwanda deportations? Does he agree with me that if they are not prepared to implement the will of the government...
Militant was his opening adjective there. Militants, what are they walking around with Kalashnikovs? What is he talking about? We don't really have militant groups here in England. Sir Philip Davis, I don't know. He probably read it. He probably read it in the Tory graph, and now here he is spewing it into the Commons. This is what happens with this sort of thing.
An act of Parliament that was passed by both Houses of Parliament, that they should conclude that being in the civil service is perhaps not for them, and maybe they can look for alternative employment at other left-wing organisations that masquerade as being impartial. Maybe they could try the BBC or Channel 4.
Mr. Speaker, my expectation is that civil servants will continue to be committed to supporting our priority of stopping the boats and deliver in accordance with the Civil Service Code. He'll know that we made specific changes to ensure compliance with that code as we push through with our plans. But I agree with him more broadly that we are the only party that has a plan to stop the boats, and we will face down all the obstacles in our way to deliver on this crucial priority for the British people. And whoever stands in our way, whether it's the Labour Party or others, we will deliver for this country on this vital issue.
He says deliver probably more than like an Uber Eats manager or whatever, doesn't he? And they've always got to go for their long-term plan. Remember, if you vote them out this time, don't give them another chance, then they won't have time to... The real thing that they've been meaning to do all along, these 15 years, is implement this long-term plan that they've just decided to tell you about now after 15 years. Fantastic, isn't it?
Mr. Speaker, China has now hacked the data of defence personnel, the Electoral Commission, various other public institutions, and has targeted many members of this House. And yet plans by China's largest wind turbine manufacturer, Mingyang Smart Energy, to build its largest European facility right here in the UK advance at pace, with the facility set to be built in Scotland. Given widely shared concerns about the involvement of hostile states such...
I've just noticed in the chat, yeah, I'm hoping my audio's coming through okay. Mithril says it was muted for a sec there. I do need a new microphone, to be honest. But yeah, thanks for that. It does look like it's coming through, though. Let me know if anything cuts off or whatnot. Thanks a lot for pointing that out in the chat. In fact, whilst I'm here, I'll just go through a couple of other comments as well. Those militant civil servants, my butler has a zombie knife. They're a militant servant, yeah. Yeah, militant civil servants isn't something I thought I'd ever hear as well. And that is no different, Mithril, you're right, to Trump saying that he'd make civil servants take an oath of loyalty to him. Wasn't there another head of state once who made the armed forces swear a loyalty to him as opposed to the country? If you remember that one. But yeah, sorry if the audio did cut off. I think it was around the time I was just pointing out the chap who was up before. The way he had his hands, it's kind of something of the night about him, which was said about another previous Tory as well. And yeah, just kind of odd, like towards the end of a horror film, that guy'd be just stood there with his hands like that. But they had these you know, very strange foibles and mannerisms, etc. A lot of the Tories, but I guess that just comes from the upper class inbreeding, you know.
such as China in the UK's critical national energy infrastructure. Does he not agree that now is the time for this project to be paused, to be reviewed by the government on national security grounds? And if not, what message does he think that sends?
Well, as I've said repeatedly, China is a country with different values to ours and is acting in a way that is increasingly authoritarian.
You probably think they're communists, don't you, Sunak? You probably think they are actually communists. You silly sausage.
Economic security, which is why this government passed the National Security and Investment Act, precisely so that we can screen transactions without commenting on individual ones, of course, to protect this country. And we have used those powers, not least to block Chinese investment in a sensitive semiconductor company, but also to ensure that the Chinese state nuclear company had no part in the future of our nuclear power. So he can rest assured that we're alive to the challenges and have passed laws that give us the powers to protect against them.
Charlize Fox.
Thank you, Mr.
It happens a lot in the right-wing media as well, this delusion that we can step up to China, who are obviously so much bigger than us geographically, in terms of population, economically, etc. But because we still rule the world at the barrel of a gun, as we did 200 years ago, according to Sunak and others alike, we can just tell China what to do and they'll go along with it. They wouldn't brush off anything that the UK has to say like a fly, I assure you.
Speaker, 5-year-old Benedict Blythe was a lovely little boy who attended a primary school in my constituency. Sadly, however, he died of anaphylaxis, a severe allergic reaction. The coroner's inquest has not yet reported, but speaking generally, on average, 2 children in every class have a food allergy, and allergic reactions take place more in school than in any other setting outside the home. Severe allergic reactions are on the rise and can be fatal. Yet there is no explicit legal requirement for schools to have allergy medication, an allergy policy, or other recommended safeguards being made available. There is only guidance. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and Benedict's parents, Helen and Pete, so that we can discuss a way forward to ensure that children who suffer from allergies in schools can be more safe, including schools having an allergy policy, adrenaline pens, and staff who know how to use them?
Yeah, that's a tragic case there, and I do actually personally know someone who's almost died from a nut allergy, and that was when they were eating out somewhere. There'd been some cross-contamination, and her throat swelled up so much that she almost choked to death. It was quite a miracle that she pulled through, actually. And 2 children in every classroom, on average, has an allergy these days. So yeah, I think that's something the Tories should do something about. But you know, I'm going to chance my arm at saying that all Sunak will respond with is, "Oh yeah, sure, we'll have a chat about that at some point in the future." These loaded questions, that's the only way it ever goes. Yeah, Phil, if your servant is polite, then they're a civil militant servant. Yeah. Good point, good point. Right, let's carry on. Let him give his
Firstly, can I
response.
extend my sympathy to Benedict's family? It's tragic always to hear about the loss of a child, and we fully understand the seriousness of severe allergies and believe that children with medical conditions should be properly supported to enjoy a full education and be safe at school. Now, there is a legal duty on the government.
As long as those children are English, of course, soon nothing to be said about the thousands of children who died in Gaza just in the last 6 months.
Further support pupils with serious allergies.
John Speller.
Yesterday, his Chancellor confirmed that it's government policy to abolish national insurance, a £46 billion annual cost, and no indication of where the money's coming from. So can the Prime Minister rule out further freezes on tax allowances or an 8p increase in income tax to pay for it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, it's total nonsense, and of course I rule that out. And let me just clear up. Mr. Speaker, there is no...
Yeah, Mithril Sunak does have a truthology. In fact, I heard he accidentally told the truth once and he went into anaphylactic shock immediately.
Funded policy. What we have said is that we have a long-term ambition to keep cutting national insurance to end the unfairness of the double taxation on work. We'll make progress towards that goal in the next Parliament, just as we already have in this, by cutting national insurance by a third in 6 months, delivering a £900 tax cut at the same time.
Well, that's a... God, where do I begin on what a ludicrous policy the abolition of national insurance is, but obviously Tories are all about low tax, small state, etc. The more you cut things like that, the less you have for investment, and therefore they have to make cuts to public services to cover up for that shortfall, some 40-odd billion pounds in this case, with national insurance, and it just snowballs and snowballs and snowballs, more and more cuts from public services caused by cuts in taxation and national insurance, which pays for the, very fundamental emergency services that we have. For example, we've already got underfunded, understaffed NHS, and they're going to have the gall to get up there in Parliament and bang on about ambulance waiting times, for example. All the while, they're making cuts to national insurance, which goes towards the funding for it, as well as the broader NHS funding crisis as it is. It's just so barefaced that they think, again, like Starmer was gloating about a Tory moving over to him, the fact that Sunak's here openly gloating about something which is an absolutely outrageously bad idea. It's just positively devoid of any logic whatsoever.
Is increasing investment in the NHS and increasing the state pension. But it's increasingly clear what this reveals is that the Labour Party opposes tax cuts for working people.
Angela Richardson.
Thank you. Empowering local pharmacies is a key part of this government's plan to cut waiting lists. In Guildford, we recently lost 2 neighbouring pharmacies. But good news, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to report that by working diligently with local pharmacists, concerned residents, the Minister and the ICB, I have helped to secure a new pharmacy in Burford. Yeah. Will my right honourable friend join me in welcoming this new pharmacy, and does he agree that it is vital residents...
Yeah, he'll get a helicopter there and fly in and cut the ribbon and then just piss off again. Doesn't matter if it's 10 miles down the road, 400 miles away, wherever it is. Obviously, Guildford's not that far, but just as an example. Of course, Sunak would love to do that. One new pharmacy, What happened to these 40 new hospitals? They just gave a lick of paint to some existing ones and called those new hospitals. Is this new pharmacy a new pharmacy? Was it an existing pharmacy and they've just changed the light bulbs and they've got a new carpet? Well, I say a new carpet, it's in the corner of the floors. I say floors, it's just one floor. I say a floor, it's more just like some random planks of wood covered in hay, but things are going really well and the Tories are giving us lots of new stuff. I assure you, guaranteed.
should have access to a good, efficient and above all local pharmacy.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, I care deeply about the future of our community pharmacies. I'm very pleased to hear about my honourable friend's success in securing a new pharmacy for her constituents, joining the 10,500 others across the country. And she's now right about the important role that our local pharmacies can play. That's why we're backing them with £645 million of additional funding through Pharmacy First, so that you can now go straight to your pharmacist, receive treatment for 7 of the most common ailments, saving you time and ensuring that patients get the care they need quicker and closer to home.
Wow,
in
Mr.
the
Speaker,
Did you hear? Oh, the future's here. The future's here. Okay, you can go to a pharmacy, right, and you can get things for the 7, whatever, however you put it, most common things that people go to a pharmacy for in the 5th richest or 6th richest country, India, having overtaken us recently. In the 6th richest country in the world in the 21st century, you can go to a pharmacy and you can buy something that is very common. And wow, if that's not something to get up on your soapbox about, then I don't know what is.
Friday, The Guardian reported major structural deficiencies at Stepping Hill Hospital in Stockport. Stepping Hill's major outpatients building, the radiology department and the critical care unit have all been condemned. In March, I met with senior officials at Stockport NHS Trust. They were very clear that a sustained lack of capital investment is the root cause of problems at my local hospital. Mr. Speaker, does the Prime Minister believe that our hospitals quite literally crumbling is the price worth paying for the 14 years of successive Conservative failure?
Yeah, and Stockport, of course, in Cheshire. It's just south of Manchester. A lot of people incorrectly think it is actually part of Manchester. It's not. It's in Cheshire. But the northwest has certainly been hit the most, or one of the worst hit places in the country because of lack of investment. I pointed this out once or twice in other streams and videos and things like this. So the northern counties essentially account for half the GDP of the nation, but get the least amount of investment. That's completely unfair. That's why there are breakaway parties, for example, such as you're probably familiar with or might have heard of, the NIP, Northern Independence Party, who are calling for all the counties between Cheshire and Scotland essentially to have autonomy from Westminster, from the grip of London, and this awfully corrupt political process, as well as with that independence be able to reap the rewards of how much GDP they make as well. And in the NIP's case, that would be Northumberland as a country, as it used to be pre-England, of course, when you still have places like Mercia, etc. So that is a fair point. And I have seen things mentioned in local media here in the northwest about Stockport hospitals, Manchester hospitals, Salford, Oldham, Rochdale, all over the place. They're just crying out. They're just being bled dry by the Tories. And he's certainly in the wrong party if he thinks that West Streeting is going to be any different. That's for sure. I'll just read out one or two bits from the chat before I carry on. Yeah, we'll soon be sending people to the local spa to get the checkups. Good point. Politics, Clive. It wouldn't surprise me. I wouldn't put it past him. Anything goes at this stage.
We fully recognise the need to invest in health infrastructure across the country, including at Stepping Hill Hospital, and that's why we are currently spending around £4 billion a year for Trust to spend on necessary maintenance and repairs, on top of the £20 billion new hospital programme and the additional funding that was put aside to deal with RAC maintenance. But he talks about a legacy of the NHS.
Well, then, according to your 40 new hospitals, that's £500 million per hospital. Don't think so.
Worst A&E performance and the longest wait times anywhere in Great Britain.
Ruth Edwards.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Nottingham City Council is expecting to fall short of its housing target by 6,000 new homes. Last time this happened, Rushcliffe, as a neighbouring authority, was forced to take thousands of homes on top of its own housing target, which led to huge pressures on our green spaces and public services. So can my right honourable friend reassure me and my constituents that the changes we've made to the planning system will mean that this time we will be protected from Labour's failure in Nottingham?
Well, my honourable friend makes an important point, and while on this side of the House, the Conservatives believe in building the right homes in the right places, with local people having a say.
Build any fucking homes. What are you talking about?
Decimating our precious countryside. And in Nottinghamshire, as she says, you can see the difference, Mr. Speaker, between the well-run Conservative County Council compared to the bankrupt Nottingham Council.
You don't have to build new homes. There are 2 million empty properties in the UK. 2 million.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Untreated sewage was pumped into English waterways for more than 3.6 million hours last year, and into the sea off Sussex beaches 3 times in the last 24 hours alone. Yet since privatisation, the water companies have been allowed to rack up debts of over £64 billion and their shareholders to pocket £78 billion in dividends. The majority of the public, including 58% of Conservative and 80% of Labour supporters, want to turf out the profiteering polluters. They want water brought back into public hands. When is he going to listen to them and end the legalised scam of privatisation?
Yeah, there are no clean rivers or streams left in the country anymore. That's a great point from Caroline Lucas, their former leader of the Green Party, of course. It's like the Tories have let this happen deliberately by putting absolute useless morons in charge of environment. Therese Coffey certainly springs to mind. And they've done it on purpose, I guess, just so that there's something else that exists in the UK that's more full of shit than Rishi Sunak's brain.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our plans to tackle this have gone further than any other previous government. In fact, we now monitor 100% of overflows, up from just 7% under the Labour Party. We're investing a record £56 billion into our water infrastructure, and we've enshrined in law strict targets and introduced unlimited fines for water companies.
Now, Sunak does not give a damn about the environment, and that's very clear in his policies. The fact that he's trying to say that the Tories have done a lot for our rivers and waterways really is an insult. It really is. You can see by the expression on Caroline Lucas's face there. Not even going to get into the new fossil fuel licenses, but it's official. You know, we've got the dirtiest streams and riverways, waterways in Europe, and not a single one is classified as clean now. Do you remember the recent incidents with the rowers? The Oxford-Cambridge rowing teams, when they had their annual boat race, and they get sick from getting the water on them. You know, that's what happens these days. That's just one example of many. That's just, you know, absolute bile that he's throwing out there, and Lucas knows it.
Holding them and their bosses to account. So it's crystal clear that where the record shows that there's only one party who has a clear plan to tackle this issue for the environment, and it's the Conservative Party.
Final question.
Just a quick reminder before the final question that Therese Coffey, former Environment Secretary, tried to blame flooding once on the wind coming from the wrong direction. It didn't come from the normal direction that it usually does, and that was her excuse for a flooding incident. Nothing to do with a lack of investment, nothing to do with the infrastructure whatsoever. Just Mother Nature caught us out there with that crazy misdirection with the rain. Okay, who's up last then?
Matt Vickers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Vickers.
Everybody knows that Stockton is a great place with great people and a great football team. My right honourable friend recently visited the mighty Stockton town to see the incredible work that they do in the local community and heard about their promotion battle. I'm sure he'll want to join me in congratulating Mickey Dunwell and the mighty Anchors on their promotion.
I guess he's really worried that he's going to be losing his seat at the next general election with that absolute brown nose in right there.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it was fantastic to visit Stockton FC with my honourable friend, who is a brilliant champion for his local community, which I see firsthand on a weekly basis. And let me join him in congratulating everyone at the club on their well-deserved promotion. And I hope some of their good luck rubs off on Southampton in the coming weeks.
Very brief. That completes Prime Minister.
What has any of that got to do with government policy or the Conservative Party or Rishi Sunak? And why is that on the order bill for this session in PMQs? Will you join me in congratulating a recent sports statistic, for example? And they do bring it up during the World Cup, for example, these kind of things, but that trivial little tidbit towards the end, what was all that about? What were they hoping to gain from that? That was just literally him trying to, I don't know, maybe it was a prop bet that he'd be able to get to ask that in PMQs. Who knows? Just looking at the comments again. Politics Clive, Therese Coffey versus a turnip. You can't win. Yeah, Therese Coffey says you can't win this race because turnips are just too robust. Jake, thanks a lot for joining us on the chat tonight. Hope you're well. The Conservative Party claiming they can solve a problem that they caused. Nothing new there, as always. And we certainly weren't lacking in any of that in this week's PMQs. And if you're watching back on a replay, just a reminder to put your comments in, what you thought about this week's PMQ session, as well as the analysis as well. Thanks a lot for all of your comments as we're going on live as well. So, obviously, the defection was going to come up a couple of times, as it did. Final scores on the doors. 4-1 to Sunak. That's 4 Stop the Boats, or thereabouts. To 1 I'm a Lawyer from Starmer. So there you go. Starmer did get off the ground after not scoring last week, though, and we'll have to see what happens there again next week. As usual with Gaza, just the deflection, distraction. As I said earlier, Labour really not doing a decent job. I think the worst thing seen week on week now is when Sunak throws this anti-Semitism bullshit around. The drummed up accusations made against the former leader of the Labour Party, and all Starmer can do is stand there and nod, or sit there and nod, whether he's in a sedentary position or not, because that suits his agenda to have to go along with that rather than actually speak the truth. And I think that's one of the worst things seen week in, week out in the House of Commons. Stephen Flynn was on point as well as usual. There were some decent questions from the opposite bench, so I'm glad that Caroline Lucas got to stand up again. I believe she made an appearance at last week, so that's been good to see. And when we're on the other side of the GE, I dare say there'll be a few more Green MPs in the seats. So that was the session pretty much. Hoyle was pretty much in the background. Didn't have to interject too much, although, you know, I thought he was at one point. They would get a bit rowdy, as always, just while someone was trying to make a very serious point. Lots of mumblings going on. I've got a great deal of admiration for this guy, I do have to say. Especially over that amendment farce a couple of months back. But even previously to that, he's just a drip, wet sponge. He doesn't hold them to account. Nearly enough. How many times do they brazenly, openly just stand up and lie? He does nothing about it. The procedures aren't there. He's not going to stop them. So we'll just stop oil instead. Yeah. Yeah. Quite unbelievable. Quite unbelievable how much they get away with those lies. What do you say?
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Yeah. I would echo those sentiments myself. Definitely. Okay, that just about brings us to the end of the stream, so I'll dip in the lounge just while we say our goodbyes, as usual. And thanks to everybody who's been watching live. Oh, Vicky Cleese here in the chat as well. Hope you've been well. Thanks a lot for joining us. Another member to welcome back. And speaking of memberships, thanks again to Mithril and Phil for your recent gift memberships. Thanks a lot for showing solidarity in that way. It's been great to see you all tonight. Hoyle will be back. Yeah. Nice one, Clive. So there'll be another PMQs next week, of course. Next scheduled live stream is for Sunday, but I'm thinking of popping in with a members only live stream between now and then. Keep a lookout for that. Please do hit all the relevant buttons. Help us to reach a wider audience. Subscribe, thumbs up, notification bell, etc. There is this obviously developing situation in Gaza. Just another quick reminder, after the stream, please do check out that most recent content which dropped today. Just my 2 cents on Israel turning their noses up at the latest round of talks, despite Hamas agreeing and continuing with that awful assault on Rafah, where 100,000 people risk being killed, injured or displaced, of course. As well as all of the other news, politics and sociology developing stories and situations as they develop during the week. So keep an eye out. Okay everyone, have yourselves a lovely evening. I will see you on the next one. Take care, my Left. I'll be seeing you soon. Good night.